So as I said, what we're going to do is we're going to walk through a little PowerPoint. This is part of the STAR PowerPoints. We've used them in the past. And we're going to walk through Reagan together. And as you can see, there's certain things here. Up here in the upper right-hand corner, there's a picture of him and Sandra Day O'Connor, the first female appointed to the Supreme Court. Down here, we have a little bit of a reference to Star Wars, part of his SDI program. Here is a picture of Reagan and Gorbachev. Here's another little bit of a look sort of at a kind of Star Wars theme. And one of his more famous quotes right in here, government is not the solution to our problems, government is the problem. And so this was a philosophy that he believed in and he adhered to and attempted to live by daily. Okay, let's go into our next slide right there. So President Ronald Reagan, there's a really good picture of President Reagan. This is probably toward the end of his presidency, the picture right there. And of course there is the quote, again, the bottom left-hand corner that Reagan is somewhat famous for. Conservatism, and of course Reagan is really the first true conservative president. By the way, we define conservatism today. As it states here someplace or the other, I believe it's on the next slide or two. But anyway, we saw in the 1980s this rise of conservatism that started in the 1960s. We saw a little bit of a video from John Green talking about the rise of conservatism even in the 60s where, the Democrats dominated. But we did see Barry Goldwater win the nomination in 64. And there was the silent majority, according to Nixon, those who truly supported conservative American values, who really dominated the country but were kind of quiet, stayed at home, did their jobs, they weren't out protesting and doing those types of things. Since the New Deal, which of course was FDR's domestic policies, the size and the power of the government has been steadily increasing. And we've talked about this numerous times. In fact, you could go all the way back to the early 1900s with the progressive era of Teddy Roosevelt, Taft, and Wilson, and we see a huge increase in the size of government. Because again, progressivism believes that government can, through the passing of laws, fix societal problems. Reagan decided it's time to cut down the size of government by doing a couple of things. He was going to reduce taxes and federal regulations on businesses. So reducing taxes is across the board. And again, when we talk about cutting taxes, unless it's specifically mentioned, we are talking about income tax. And so everyone who paid income tax in the 1980s paid less under Ronald Reagan. I've already told you the top income tax rate was 72% when he became president. It was 28% when he left. A savings of over 40%. That's, again, those are for the millionaires. But for people like you and I, middle class, who make $60,000, $70,000, $50,000, whatever it may be, we saw our taxes go down as well. In addition to that, you have the regulations on businesses being cut. And again, we talked about this previously, regulations from the EPA, for example. And of course, any regulation essentially is a tax which causes the price of goods to go up. Therefore, you and I pay more. He also wanted to, and again, what did he want to do to cut down federal government, the size of government? Second one, he wanted to increase private competition. Finally, he wanted to increase the strength of the military. Now, as you look at the second bullet, he wanted to cut down the size of federal government. The first one does that, and the second two really don't. This is not really a well-written slide. Sorry about that. I didn't make it. Again, if you're going to increase the strength of the military, you're going to have to increase the size of the military. In a sense, you're making government bigger because the military is part of the government. So it seems somewhat contradictory, but to Reagan, he believed that our military was the key to our peace. He used another phrase, peace through strength. The stronger we are, the more likely we are to have peace. Again, no one's going to mug a 6'5", 300-pound bodybuilding black belt. They mug 85-year-old blue-haired ladies as they leave the ATM or after they cash the welfare checks. Peace through strength. Our final bullet, let me turn this page. Well, Reagan wanted to expand the size of the government in one direction, which would be this direction right here by increasing the military, while reducing it in another. Again, as a conservative, Reagan believed that there are certain jobs the government had. One of them was to protect the United States, and that, of course, means using the military. So he believed in a bigger, stronger, more powerful, more modern military, which, of course, increases the size of government, increases spending, but he also wanted to shrink parts of government which he felt were not really allowed by the Constitution. Certain cabinet positions, for example. Let's go on to our next slide. And as I mentioned to you previously, Reagan is a former actor. One of his more well-known roles, if not the best role for which he is known, was a series of movies with Bonzo the Chimp. This is in the 30s, early 40s. This particular poster is for Bedtime for Bonzo. There's 3 or 4 others. Bonzo Goes to College and blah, blah, blah. They're kind of cute, dumb little movies, you know. They're not going to win Academy Awards, and, you know, they're not going to become your all-time favorite movies. And Reagan wasn't a great actor. He was a pretty good actor. He was a very solid B actor. I mean, he's not star material, John Wayne kind of stuff. But he was a really good actor. And, of course, that ability to be in front of the camera, to be in front of an audience with a microphone in your face, excuse me, translated well for him in politics. Okay. The Reagan presidency would continue. Reagan was a popular Hollywood actor before entering politics. Again, we talked about that. He made movies with Errol Flynn. I mean, all the big stars of the day. Reagan was originally a Democrat. And again, the Democrats of the 20s and 30s are vastly different than the Democrats of today. He was a Democrat until he realized the federal government, the size of the federal government, was too powerful and too intrusive. He was fond of saying, I did not leave the Democrat Party left me. And again, progressivism, liberalism, the Democrat Party became more of a party of those two concepts. The party of Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt, of Johnson, of government handouts, government growth, government intrusion into our lives. And that's why Reagan left and became a Republican. Reagan was elected the California governor and twice ran and twice lost a presidential race in 68 and 76. So in 68, he started running for president. Nixon won that. In 76, he challenged Gerald Ford. Ford won that. And, of course, he won his own race, his first race in 80, and then, of course, again in 84. So he had some political experience as governor of California, the largest state in the country. And probably at the time he was governor, it may have been the first or at least the second largest in terms of population. And then, of course, he had some heartbreak running for the presidency 2 years and losing both. 1980, our next to last bullet, rising inflation. The Iranian hostage situation gave Reagan the winning edge over President Carter for the presidency. This is a slide. Why did he win? Well, again, inflation, stagflation, which we've talked about. Rising prices, which is inflation, and then high unemployment equals stagflation. Because of that and the Iranian hostage situation, which was a national embarrassment, the American public turned to Reagan, and he won 44 of the 50 states in the 1980 election. George H.W. was selected as his VP, and here, of course, is a picture of Reagan and Bush. Now, ironically, Bush created the term voodoo economics. That's what we often refer to as Reaganomics or supply-side economics. He called it voodoo. Why? Because he was running for president as well. So here we have two opponents in 1980. One of them is highly critical of the other. The loser is critical. The winner brings the loser in, and they win the presidency. So you think about today's politics. Hillary and Bernie are getting kind of nasty. Trump and Cruz have been nasty for a while. So if I'm President Reagan, I'm Ronald Reagan, and this guy George H.W. calls my economic policies voodoo, but I still invite him on the ticket, there's still hope for Trump Cruz or Hillary Bernie, or Bernie Hillary, or Cruz Trump, whatever. Okay, in combination you want. Hillary Trump and Bernie. Well, you get the idea. Okay, so there is a possibility, though I wouldn't bet on it if I were you. Okay, let's take a quick look at his domestic policy. And there's a picture of your hero in mind, Charlie Brown. And Lucy, of course, you've seen this bit where Lucy holds the football. Charlie runs up, she pulls it away. He flies through the air, falls flat on his back. She walks over the football and laughs at him. You gotta love Peanuts. Anyway, caption or the picture reads, if you cut taxes on the rich, they'll divest that money and create more jobs for everyone. Now, is this an endorsement for supply side or a criticism of it? Yeah, criticism. Lucy fools Charlie Brown every time I pull the football away. By talking about cutting taxes, she, who is supposed to be Ronald Reagan in this cartoon, is fooling the people the way Lucy fools Charlie Brown. That is the message behind it. So, there weren't a lot of people in the media who liked Reagan. Let me rephrase that. They liked Reagan. They didn't like his politics. And so they criticized him every chance they got. Okay, so we're looking at the domestic policy. Once again, we've already seen the cartoon. We're not going to go any further than that. Stagflation was still the main problem as he becomes president. Now, his answer is what the media called Reaganomics, in combination of his last name and the word economics, but really is supply-side economics. Now, I think I've defined this for you already, but I'm going to go ahead and redefine it because it's in the third bullet. Reaganomics, supply-side economics, is essentially lower taxes and decreasing business regulations. And what does these two things do? Well, it allows the producers, people who produce goods or produce services, to create a larger supply of goods. So, supply-side economics cuts taxes again, unless it's specifically mentioned, gas tax, cigarette tax, unless it's specifically mentioned, when you hear cut or raise taxes, we're talking income tax. You cut income taxes, you decrease business regulations, which will then lead to a larger supply of goods. Now, why is that important? Well, we go to the next bullet. Larger supply of goods would drive down the prices and stop inflation. And this is key. We want to drive down the price of goods. We want to get inflation lower and under control. And you do that by driving prices down. How do you drive prices down? Well, there's a couple ways. Number one is you increase supply. That basic concept of supply and demand we've been discussing all year. Number two, you want to drive prices down, you decrease demand, which means no one wants to buy something. And that's not good for an economy. So we scratch that. So you want to cut prices. Supply and demand tells you you have to increase supply. So Reaganomics is about increasing the supply of goods through lower taxes and cutting business regulations. Regulations are taxes that drive the price of goods up. Why do we have stagflation? Well, we had high inflation. High inflation was caused by over-regulating our businesses. Those regulations cause prices to go up. Now, generally, inflation is a sign of a strong economy. People are buying stuff, and therefore, prices rise. But in stagflation, you have inflation due to government regulation and high unemployment. It's a killer to the economy. And our final bullet, before we look at the jobs created, as a side benefit from the lower taxes, ending business regulations, it would lead to higher employment because business workers were needed to build the goods, to make the goods that are being produced. As more and more goods are produced, you need more and more workers. As more and more workers are employed, they have more money. They go out and buy stuff. There's a greater demand. You hire more people to make more goods. They make more money. They go out and they buy more stuff, and the cycle repeats itself. And it's not just the puppies making the cars. It is the people supplying the raw materials. It's the people who's transporting them. It's the people who's selling them. In some cases, the people working on them, an auto mechanic. Those types of jobs all increase, which again helps end the high unemployment we had under stagflation. Now, you take a quick look at this bottom right-hand corner. The Reagan tax cut created jobs. Net jobs created, and there's the number there. In 1983, plus 600,000, plus 4 million in 84, over 2 million, almost 3 million in 85. 1.9 in 86, 2.6 in 87, 3.2 in 88, and 2.6 in 89. I realized a couple of the numbers there on the bottom are a little bit difficult to see because of the little finger. Hate that finger. But anyway, so you can see that the Reagan policies, okay, supply side economics, were successful. We have a couple more slides and we will be done. We continue with his domestic, his domestic policies. The U.S. debt rose well, again, this is a strange one. Okay, let me read it and explain it a little bit. U.S. debt rose due to a decrease in tax revenues and to an increase in military spending. That's not really true. It is to a small extent. Tax cuts will create a short-term tax revenue deficit. Short-term. Long-term, more than a year, 6 months to a year or more, you have a huge increase in tax revenues. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but trust me, look it up on the net if you really want to look at it. Go to the 80s and look at the tax revenues for the entire decade. Look at the revenues brought in taxes by the government prior to the tax cuts, and then look at the revenues after the tax cuts. You will see a huge increase in revenue. The problem with our government is not enough money. The problem with our government is too much spending. Now, part of that spending was military. True indeed. But that's not it. That's not the only problem. Again, to govern, you have to make deals. You have to compromise. Reagan wanted tax cuts and government spending or military spending. The Democrats in Congress didn't want either one, but they were willing to give it to him if he would compromise and do a few things. Raise spending on social issues. Legalize. Give amnesty to 3 million illegals in the country. That happened in 86, I think it was. Why? Well, because those illegals are going to vote Democrat. That's why the Democrats wanted it. Okay? Real simple. I mean, let's not lie to each other. If people coming from Mexico illegally were going to vote Republican, we'd have a wall at the border 50 feet high. We'd have piranhas and sharks in the Rio Grande. And the sharks have little lasers on their head. Something Austin Powers never could get. But since they vote Democrat, we want to let them in. Okay? It's that simple. Anyone tells you differently, they're lying to you. So, was increased military spending a part of the reason why our debt increased? Yes, it is. But it's not just military spending, because we didn't spend that much on the military. It's a spending an increase in spending across the board. And why did Reagan agree to that? He's a conservative because he wanted the tax cuts, because he wanted the military spending to increase. And so he had to compromise. That's what governing is. Unemployment rates also rose as Americans bought more things from overseas than were sold overseas. This is part of that trade deficit, which I think we've discussed previously. And this is partially due to the higher cost of making goods here. Higher union rates, higher union wages, government regulations making it more and more difficult to build things. That caused higher prices for American goods, which means it was cheaper to buy foreign goods. The Mazzoli-Simpson Act changed the United States of America's immigration policy to deal with illegal immigration by legalizing, granting amnesty to illegals who had been in the United States since 1981. Again, I think this was signed in law in 86. For some reason, that date sounds right. So, Reagan wanted tax cuts. He wants some regulations cut. He wanted a bigger, stronger, better military. What Democrats want? More social spending. Legalizing future Democrat voters, legalizing, granting amnesty to illegals. That's governing. Compromise. Reagan appoints Sandra Day O'Connor, and here's the picture that we saw on the first page. Sandra Day O'Connor, the first woman justice on the Supreme Court, appointed by the Republican Ronald Reagan. And here it's a little bit difficult to see, upper right, an increase in the debt. Now again, this is due to a general increase in, or a great increase in spending. It's not due to tax cuts. Tax cuts bring in more revenue. In fact, if time permits, I'll look that up in a few minutes. We'll finish this in about 5 minutes, and I'll look that up and show it to you today or tomorrow. The revenues over the last several decades, tax revenues. Okay. Again, we go through this concept. As I mentioned earlier, Reagan believed in peace through strength. Reagan set out to rebuild the American confidence after Vietnam. Again, Vietnam, when Reagan's elected in 80, is, again, the fall Saigon 5 years before. The end of the war, 7 years before. Nixon's only out of office, he resigned from office 6 years before. The Iranian hostages come home the day Reagan is inaugurated. American confidence is at an all-time low. Part of it's Vietnam, and part of the other issues I just mentioned. So he wanted to rebuild our military, and he wanted the United States to continue to act as the world's defender of freedom and democracy. We are the shining light. We are the leader in the world, or we were, in democracy and freedom. Let he who desires peace prepare for war. No one, as I said earlier, is going to take on a 6'5", 300-pound karate expert. You do not attack strength; you attack weakness. Reagan sent the Marines to Grenada after a communist takeover to remove the commies. He was successful. Peace through strength meant the best way to prevent war was to make our enemies think the United States had the means and the will to stop communist aggression. Here is the important part. The means, that's cool. You got guns, you got soldiers, you got planes. The most important part is the will. No one doubted Ronald Reagan had the will to defend democracy, freedom, America. In the 80s, those three words were synonymous. They meant the same thing. Shortly after 9/11, no one doubted. Now, again, everybody had a lot of doubts about George W. when he was inaugurated. After 9/11, no one doubted George W.'s desire to protect America, root out. Let me repeat that. After 9/11, no one doubted George W.'s will to root out evil, Islamic terrorism, and destroy it. Does anyone believe Barack Obama has that same will? I don't think anyone on the planet does. Having the means is one thing. Having the will to use it, in this case to stop communist aggression under Reagan, today would be Islamic terrorism. Having the means, yes. The will, something else. And then finally, we go back to Star Wars, a derisive term created by the media to refer to the Strategic Defense Initiative. And here's a little bit of a cartoon drawing, or a drawing of what it should be. That's, by the way, not eventually what happened. It was originally to be a space-based defense system that would shoot down missiles shot at us by the Soviet Union. We do have a missile defense capability where, and I think I described this to you yesterday, where we can shoot down incoming ICBMs, incoming nuclear missiles, but it's not space-based, it's land-based. But that initiative, the SDI, the Russians took them seriously because the Russians knew Reagan had the will to build it and use it. I don't think the technology actually is available. You know, maybe Mr. Spock could build something like that, but we can't. So we went with another system that is effective. Okay, I think. We are coming up on the end. Let me go through this real quickly, and we should be about done. For some of you, I think this is our last one. Terrorism. The use of bombings, assassinations, kidnappings, and other acts of terror to make political groups' voice be heard, and that governments will yield to their demands. I mean, in terrorism, the act of creating terror, spreading terror. Guy walks into a daycare and blows himself up, killing all the kids. A guy starts shooting in a mall. A guy goes to a rock concert and pulls out a pistol and starts shooting. Those are all acts of terror. In the 1970s, Iran became the first terrorist nation, the first terrorist state as we know them today. Okay, 1983, Reagan sends the Marines to Lebanon as part of a multinational peacekeeping force. A suicide bomber in a truck filled with explosives crashes, attacks the American embassy, crashes into it, killing 241 Marines in their barracks as they slept at night. And here is an image of the aftermath. Images. So, we send Marines to Lebanon, part of a multinational peacekeeping organization because of the civil war in there. A suicide bomber attacks the embassy, driving a truck filled with explosives into the Marine barracks, killing 241 Marines as they slept. Muammar Gaddafi, Libya's president, and there's a picture of Gaddafi, bombed, or people working for him bombed a discotheque in Germany, a nightclub, killing several American soldiers. 1986, Reagan bombs Libya, bombs Muammar Gaddafi's home in response to that, killing a couple of his kids and wounding Gaddafi rather seriously. We didn't hear from Gaddafi for 25, 30 years after that. What is important? The means are cool. The most important thing is the will to use those means. No one doubted Reagan had the will. His response to this, to that, proves it. Okay, let's go to our next slide. It seems to be taking a few moments. Again, there were a lot of things that happened while Reagan was president that he didn't really, pay attention to because he trusted his subordinates. But again, I do not think it's a good thing that we broke the laws, even though the outcome was a good one, helping fight the anti-communist Contras fight the Sandinistas in Nicaragua. That's a good thing. But again, the ends do not always justify the means. People broke the law. When the scandal was revealed, they were punished. And again, I don't think the U.S. reputation was overly tarnished. I don't think it's that big a deal. I think the media blew it out of proportion far more than what really was. But again, we got to go back to this last one. How trustworthy is our government? This is an issue we had during Vietnam. This is an issue we had because of the Pentagon Papers, Nixon resigning. I mean, on and on and on. A lot of issues. Let's go to our last slide. And we're done. And that took far longer than anticipated. Reagan referred to USSR as the evil empire. And here you have, again, a little bit of a reference to Star Wars. Reagan being, of course, Luke Walker, and Gorbachev being the Darth Vader character. Okay. Gorbachev introduced free enterprise reforms to the failing economic situation of Russia. Again, we've talked about socialism and communism and how they are not good. They're not a good economic system. They're not compatible with mankind's desires to be free and innovate and blah, blah, blah. Some say that it was President Reagan and that he deserves credit for the fall of communism because of his strong stand of defense and support of democracy. They are correct. He does deserve a good chunk of the credit. Does he deserve it all? No. Former Pope John Paul, when he was a priest in Poland, Margaret Thatcher, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, and a whole bunch of other people helped. But here in America, no one is more responsible for the downfall of communism than Ronald Reagan. Are there other people equally responsible? Yes. But in America, no one's more responsible. He did that much. Other people believe that Reagan benefited from a weak Russian economy and Gorbachev's reform efforts. Yeah, again, is he solely responsible? No. Does he sometimes receive more credit than he deserves? Yeah, probably. But he does deserve a great deal of credit. And I think we saw this in the video the other day. Bottom right-hand corner, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. He is in West Berlin, standing in front of the Berlin Wall. He's imploring Gorbachev to tear it down. Within 4 years or so, the wall is torn down. Now again, did they do it because Reagan said so? No. But he did play a large role. Is he the only one? No. Does he oftentimes get more credit than he deserves, even by people like me? Yes. But he does deserve a huge chunk of the credit. Okay. I believe we are done with this. Our look at President Reagan. So we're going to go ahead and kill this.